name is Sasha Anderson, and this is my honors senior capstone project. It's about the sociolinguistics of power, and I will start out talking a bit about the background of sociolinguistic theory, and then I will move on to talking about some practical uses of linguistics to gain or lose power in face-to-face interactions. And then I'll move on to talking about more general institutional uses of language to gain power. So, the first thing to do when talking about the sociolinguistics of anything, and power in specific, is to dispel the illusion of linguistic communism. Early sociolinguists tended to think that language was sort of this pool that everyone had equal access to, and that everyone was allowed to draw from and use equally. For instance, theorists such as Auguste Comte felt language forms a kind of wealth, which all can make use of at once without causing any diminution of the store, and which thus admits a complete community of enjoyment, for all freely participating in the general treasure and consciously aid in its preservation. Now, we know today that this is not true, that different people have differing access to language, and certain people are able to use it to their advantage more so than others. So, setting the stage for a sociolinguistics of power. First off, we had the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, and that consists of two theories. The first one is the theory of linguistic relativity, and this says that when a word is said, two different people may have two completely different connotations of what that word means. So there's not any sort of objective definition of a word. We each experience words differently. So for instance, when I say the word diamond, I may be thinking of a piece of rock that is that big and has been unpolished and was just found in a mountain. Whereas when I say the word diamond, you may think of a very small, precious gem that has already been set into a ring, cut, and polished. The second theory is a theory of linguistic determinism. So that was basically the idea that establishes the fact that the way we speak affects the way we think. So the way we form words and the way we talk about things will then lead to shape our thoughts and our assumptions about things. Then, and sort of as a disclaimer, this theory was quite popular and had a lot of credibility when it was first proposed. Then it fell into a period of disfavor due to some experiments that mostly to do with color that they thought proved that linguistic relativity didn't exist, but has now come back into favor and is supported by new tests. Then along came Noam Chomsky, who is a huge name in linguistics, and one of his most important theories is that of the universality of language, so that even though we all have different languages, they are all able to express and generate an infinite amount of phrases, and they all can express anything that we're feeling. So, and that all languages do the same basic functions, regardless of if they have different syntactical or morphological structure. Finally, very current is Pierre Bourdieu, and he has been crucial to talking about the role of the researcher in linguistics. So when we're trying to determine what words mean to certain people, the researcher plays a part in that, and they are not completely objective. They have certain assumptions about words as well. And he has also gone on to refute that idea of linguistic communism. He has shown quite clearly that different people have different access to language and are able to use it in different ways, and that it's not some sort of general pool that we all gain power from. So talking about the way that power is conveyed through face-to-face interactions through language. First off, we need a good definition of power, so we know what exactly we're talking about. And I chose the one by Moore and Hendry, and they define power as the force in society that gets things done. And by studying it, we can identify who controls what and for whose benefit. So, the first category would be language use and gender. And generally, language is used to benefit men. One of the primary ways that this is done is the fact that we use man to actually represent all human beings. So when we think of a default human being, it tends to be male. And that shifts the way we think about things. So even when we think we're talking in a neutral manner, we're actually gendering the subject subconsciously. Also, the fact that women must identify themselves in relation to their sexual situation, whether they are married, single, or divorced, whereas men have a single moniker, which is Mr. So they are allowed to go through society without that sort of any sort of assumptions being made based on what their marital status is, whereas women have to proclaim that up front, and it's a way to sort of control and police and make assumptions about women's sexuality. Thirdly, are marked and unmarked terms. So a unmarked term is what we generically use to refer to an object. So I'm looking at an animal on safari, and I will say that's a lion. That's the unmarked term, which connotes both a male lion and also just any sort of lion, regardless of gender. The marked term, on the other hand, is lioness. So the fact that because it's female, we have to create a different term for it, because going back to the idea we use man to represent all humans, we generally use terms, generic terms also imply maleness. This also plays into things like concepts like male nurse. So the fact that somehow we assume that a nurse must be female, and so we have to create a marked term of male nurse so that people know that it's not, so people know not to assume that it's automatically female. So these sort of terms get used very subtly and subconsciously to create ideas about what gender certain people or objects or professions are. Lastly, there's semantic derogation. Thomas and Waring defined this as the process of words which refer to women acquiring demeaning or sexual connotations. We see this very commonly with the word bachelor versus spinster. Your spinster sort of implies lonely, unsuccessful, unattractive, all sorts of negative things, whereas bachelor is fairly neutral, if not a little bit celebrated, the fact that the man is strong and independent. Same with master and mistress. Mistress is a very powerful term. Mistress is very subservient as someone who's been dominated. And then lastly, certain words can take on female connotations that are very negative. So we have words like nagging, yammering, chattering that are not necessarily female, but we have a very female idea of those words. We use them mostly to describe the talk of females, which then goes on to make us assume that women talk in these ways, that women speaking is not as valuable. Language and ethnicity. First